When we announced retiring and closing the studio, we were overwhelmed with projects, some of which we turned down. We chose this panel as our last panel because the client wanted something original and unique. We would use some of our very special glasses and use nearly the full spectrum of our glass crafting techniques to produce this last panel. We submitted 6 design ideas for her approval. She chose number 3. Part of the design inspiration came from this dress and this outfit. Once the design was chosen, we produced 2 full-size drawings, one on heavy paper to cut out and use for glass cutting templates, the other on tracing paper to use to actually construct the panel on. Next is glass selection. We have 2 glass racks in the main studio that contain our special glasses. It's from these racks that we chose the glass for this panel. We chose 8 different glasses for this panel. 3 of these are very unique. This is Ouroboros Fibroid. This is Pilkington Reeded. And last, a Bullseye single-rolled glass. The unique thing about these 3 glasses is that they are all clear glass that is coated using a special high-temperature vacuum metal fuming process. This type of glass we call a dichroic glass. Depending on the light source and the angle of viewing, dichroic glass can look like several different glasses. We've had this sheet of dichroic for over 20 years. You can see in this newspaper article dated 1997 where I'm showing this sheet to a newspaper reporter. We ended up using a different dichroic glass for that project and never used this one until now. Next, we lay our pattern templates to a precise spot on our glass sheet. This choosing exactly where on the sheet each piece of glass is cut is critical in achieving the desired design concept of color and texture. After marking the templates on the glass, we are ready to begin cutting the glass. With a couple of special tools and some good instruction, most people can learn to cut glass, but it's still fascinating to watch someone that is experienced cut glass. We use glass from all over the world in this panel, some from England, some from France, Germany, and of course the United States. This is a piece of US-made Spectrum Teal water glass. It may not be produced anymore. In 2016, Spectrum Glass announced it was ending production. This glass that we used as background is Pilkington Chinchilla, made in England. They no longer produce this particular texture. This is full hand-blown antique glass, Saint-Just Saint-Gobain, from France. We've etched this glass to create flower centers. This is a very special antique glass called flashed glass from A.C. Fischer in Germany. This looks like a dark red glass, but it's actually mostly light blue with a thin layer of red glass on one side. If we etch away the thin red layer of glass, we can produce a two-color design in the glass. The process we use to etch glass requires covering the glass with a special vinyl resist on the side to be etched. The back of the glass is also covered with masking tape to prevent scratches to that side of the glass during the etching process. We transfer our pattern to the vinyl resist and then cut out the areas to be etched. Then it's into the etching room to be etched. We etch the flash side, that's the red side, with 120 grit aluminum oxide abrasing at about 80 psi. This gives us a very clean etched edge with no chipping. Here we've stopped the etching process so you can see the red layer being etched away. We use warm water to soften the resist so that it can easily be peeled off. Coincidentally, this sheet of flash glass is more than 20 years old, and this company, A.C. Fischer, after more than a century in operation, closed several years ago. And now we have a unique etched piece of glass for the panel. Another special kind of glass we wanted to use was beveled glass. Many years ago, we acquired the equipment and the skill to produce beveled glass, and we've made perhaps a few thousand of them. Bevels are made from good quality plate glass, 3/16 inch thick or thicker. The plate used in this panel is around 100 years old and is a little more than 1/4 inch thick. We know it's that old because of its yellow-green tint when viewed on edge. Here it is next to a sheet of modern plate, which is a bluish green in color. Cutting thick plate glass can be challenging because of its thickness. It's much more difficult to bend the score open. Special tools are needed to exert enough pressure to bend glass this thick. We have 3 beveling machines in the studio. A small cone beveler on the left, a vertical wheel beveler in the middle, and a flat beveler on the right. Each of these machines does certain bevel shapes best. The flat beveler is best for straight and outside curved sides. This disc is covered with 80 grit diamonds and has water flowing across it from the center of the disc. Inside curved shapes are best done on the vertical wheel beveler. This wheel is also covered with 80 grit diamonds. This completes the first step in making a bevel. We call this step roughing. The next step, called smoothing, can be done with smaller grit diamonds, but we prefer to use a very old vertical sandstone wheel, which leaves a subtle distortion in the finished bevel that we like. We heard several years ago that the stone quarry where this stone was mined had run out of this quality of stone, and these wheels were no longer available. In each of these steps, the glass must be held at exactly the same angle the whole length of each beveled side. This requires considerable practice to perfect. Here I'm adjusting the water flow on this wheel. All beveling surfaces must have water flowing over them to keep the glass cool and flush away glass dust. This step is called pre-polishing. We use a rather modern wheel for that purpose. It's a rubber wheel impregnated with 600 grit diamonds. The last step is polishing. This is done on a large Spanish felt wheel. We add a mud-like slurry of cerium oxide to the wheel to do the actual polishing. And then finally, after all these steps, we have a brilliant prismatic beveled edge on our piece of glass. The next step in producing the panel was the fitting and foiling process. This involved very precisely fitting each piece of glass with its surrounding pieces. We carefully mark exactly where we want to remove glass to make a good fit with adjoining pieces. This fine adjustment is then made using a diamond grinder. When we are satisfied with how the piece fits, we carefully wrap the piece with copper foil tape. The foiled piece is then burnished so that the tape is a tight fit against the glass. The foiled piece of glass is then placed in its proper position, and we repeat the process with the next piece. The next step is to solder all of the pieces together. We use a high-quality 50% tin, 50% lead solder for this process. The reason for wrapping each piece of glass with copper foil now becomes clear. It's to give the solder something to stick to. We want a nice, smooth, raised bump or crown of solder. The raised crown is the strength factor that gives the panel its structural integrity, so that it will last for many decades or even centuries. Once we've completed the soldering, we still have to add a zinc border and chemically treat the soldered lines. Here we've added a 1/2 inch zinc border channel, and we have chemically treated all the metal to give it an aged pewter look. This is not a new technique. This process and the chemicals have been used for over 100 years. In 43 years and nearly 2,000 commissions, we signed this panel quite different than all those that went before it. The panel was installed in a custom frame made by Jack Buss at Orion Woodworks. And then it was ready to be hung and displayed to show off its wide variation of optical properties. We thought maybe you'd like to see the first panel crafted at A Touch of Glass. We did this in 1974 at the first real location of A Touch of Glass, our house at 415 Willard Avenue, Bloomington, Illinois. Linda designed this panel as well, and it's an interesting fact that these are the only panels that Linda designed. Quite a distinction to have designed the first and the last.